Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. I ended my last review on the optimistic note that sometimes it's good to try things you don't think you'll enjoy, and it's been a while since I've watched a straightforward slice-of-life romance. Well, maybe it doesn't seem that way, given I just reviewed Twinkle Stars back in May, but it really wasn't the love story that caught my attention in that one, and that wasn't the case here. And unlike with my last review, I've only ever heard good things about this show, so I was actually looking forward to checking it out. Toradora is the story of Taiga and Ryuji, and things looked promising from the very first episode. Our main characters are very compatible, from their designs alone. Ryuji is very kind and responsible. It's just him and his mother, who's a little flighty, so he's used to doing all the housework himself. But he looks a little intimidating, so he's got a reputation around school for being a delinquent. On the other hand, Taiga looks like a harmless little doll, but her violent nature has gained her pretty much the same reputation. But Taiga and Ryuji both have one person who's seen through the reputation and befriended them anyway, and that's where things get interesting. On top of being misunderstood by their classmates and being next-door neighbors, they also each have a crush on the other's best friend. Our story starts when Taiga leaves a love letter in Ryuji's bag, thinking it was his friend Kitamura's desk instead. When she realizes her mistake, she goes as far as to break into his house to get it back. But this sort of overreaction is something Ryuji will soon grow used to from Taiga. Their first encounter really does a great job setting up both of their characters. All of Taiga's violence is meant to cover up that she's insecure about being so small, as well as a few other things. She would rather everyone be afraid of her than feel bad for her, but she's not actually this invincible brick wall. Anger is just the safest way to express her feelings without getting hurt even worse. Meanwhile, Ryuji is too nice for his own good. When he sees that Taiga went to such lengths to get her letter back because she's embarrassed, he really goes above and beyond trying to make her feel better, considering she's now attacked him twice and broken into his house. He reveals his own crush on her friend Minori, as well as a whole box of poems and letters and things he never had the courage to deliver, in a grand laugh-at-me-instead sort of gesture. And I was kind of expecting them to leave it at that they'd be a part of each other's lives now just because they knew each other's secret. At most, I expected them to be actively blackmailing each other or something, but they surprised me by becoming immediate friends. Taiga and Ryuji agree to help each other out with the matchmaking, and we have our story. I guess one good thing about a slice-of-life story is that I don't have to worry too much about spoilers. Not the way I usually do anyway, unless I wanted to get into the really specific details of each episode. Because even the main story of their love lives blends really easily into their everyday lives. Taiga doesn't have the perfect home life either. Her parents are very well off, but divorced. They both remarried, and she didn't really fit into either of their new families, so instead of trying to make it work, they set her up in her own apartment and deposit money into a bank account each week. Which I think says enough about their characters on its own, but Taiga's parents do each make an appearance by the series' end. But despite being financially stable, it's clear that she never really learned how to take care of herself. When Ryuji sees the state of her apartment, he starts taking care of her. Pretty soon they're eating their meals and walking to school together, as well as scheming up ways to make Minori and Kitamura return their feelings. It's not long before their classmates start to see what was obvious to the viewers from the beginning, that they're kind of perfect for each other, and a different sort of rumor begins to circulate. Which brings us to the best friends. I really liked both Minori and Kitamura from the beginning, and they are also very alike, meaning a little eccentric. They're both very fun characters, outgoing and a little blunt. Minori is the type I would describe as being in love with life. She's the star of the school softball team and works more jobs than her friends can even keep track of, but she approaches everything with lots of energy and enthusiasm. And the fact that she could see right through Taiga and accept her anyway was an immediate point in her favor too. Ryuji's such a good person that it didn't feel like as much of a big deal for Kitamura. Anyone would like him once they got past his appearance, but Kitamura was a very fun character too. He's the vice president of the student council, and he looks the part, so it never failed to catch me off guard whenever he did something a little wild. The most important similarity, however, was that once these two hear the rumors about Ryuji and Taiga, they're both immediately on board and want to do whatever they can to make sure their friends are happy. And so this story that was already a little crazy gets even more complicated. There's one other major aspect to this story, though. As more time passes and the two start getting involved more at school, Taiga and Ryuji's classmates slowly start to accept them for who they are. It's a really sweet storyline, actually, but it happens so gradually and naturally that it's easy to miss if you're not looking for it. There are really only 2 times it's not that subtle. One is a really good scene near the end of the second episode where Taiga and Ryuji go on this big venting fest about how they're both so sick of being misunderstood and having all these assumptions made about them. I was glad to see something like that so early on because it set up an emotional connection, not just a professional one. And the other time it's addressed openly introduces our last main character. Ami Kawashima is a childhood friend of Kitamura's. She also happens to be a very popular model. She transfers into their school and is immediately treated like a goddess of sorts because she's beautiful and friendly and cute in an airheaded sort of way. But as you probably could have guessed, there's nothing sweet about the real her. Once the facade comes down, she's a bit of a diva, rude and manipulative. Kitamura is actually aware of this already and wants her to become more comfortable being herself. Ami meets her match almost immediately in Taiga, who isn't willing to put up with her bullshit for even a second, but the actual resolution is a lot more heartfelt than just some life lesson where Ami gets screwed over for being fake. It turns out that Ami moved to their little town to try and escape an actual stalker, who followed her there anyway. But the longer she spends with her new classmates, the more her own facade starts to wear on her, especially because Taiga is at least as rude as she is, and everyone accepts her for who she is anyway. Her final straw is seeing Taiga confront the stalker when she was the one whose life he was ruining. It was kind of empowering to see her totally lose it, as funny as that sounds. Ultimately, this experience has enough of an impact on her that she decides to cut back on her modeling and stay at their school until graduation, and she becomes a permanent part of their little group. Once this group is set, the rest of the show plays out in a very slice-of-life way. I feel like I say that a lot, and I don't usually mean that in a good way, but there's nothing judgmental about it this time. It's just the best way to describe them all growing closer and developing as characters over time through some of their everyday adventures. Normally, I find those types of stories kind of slow, and even though I enjoyed Toradora, it wasn't a show that I could watch more than an episode or 2 of at a time, but I think they did a lot of things right. None of their plot points just drop off. Taiga and Ryuji's imperfect family lives are explored, not just hinted at to make them seem even more compatible, for one. In fact, by the end of the series, it's more a story about family than it is romance. It's made me analyze the whole genre a little differently. For all the other slice-of-life stories I've seen with episode after episode of plot lines that are never going to be so much as referenced again, I think Toradora is probably the best I've seen the slice-of-life element handled ever. These little everyday adventures will only feel important if the show treats them like they're important, and one way to do this is to make sure the characters themselves don't forget any of these experiences and what they learned from them, that their growth as characters is continuous. The romance, another aspect of stories I rarely enjoy, was fine. They had chemistry from the beginning, and the major problem they run into was realistic, as well as very connected to the original plot that brought them together. Taiga and Ryuji are both so focused on getting the other together with their original crush that they kind of miss themselves falling in love with each other before it's already happened. I do think the angst brought on by this is dragged out just a little too long, and the ending isn't exactly what I wanted, but I really enjoyed Toradora as a whole. It checks off two of my most important points: likable characters who grow over the course of the series. So I can see why it has such a good reputation, especially if slice of life and romance are two things you already enjoy going into it, and I suggest checking it out if you missed it. Thank you for watching.